My name is Marcus Holloway. I'm 66 years old, and 3 months ago, I sold everything I owned right before a major heart surgery that could have been my last. But what my son-in-law didn't know was that I was the one who bought his dream house, the very house he'd used to humiliate me for years, telling me I could never afford anything like it. When he found out who the new owner really was, he passed out right there at the closing table. But this story doesn't begin there. It begins 4 years earlier, the day my daughter married the wrong man, and I made the mistake of staying quiet. Imagine the scene. I'm sitting in a hospital waiting room, wearing an oversized green paper gown, waiting for them to call me in for open heart surgery, a procedure with a 50% chance of success. My daughter, Naomi, is crying in the hallway because she thinks her dad is about to die poor and leave her nothing. My son-in-law, Julian, is on his phone, calculating how much my small condo is worth and if it's enough for the down payment on the house he wants. Neither of them knows that my bank account holds more money than they have seen in their entire lives. Money I earned not working in an air-conditioned office like Julian, but hauling 100-pound bags of concrete and pouring foundations under the hot sun for 30 years as a union contractor. The irony is delicious, isn't it? The son-in-law who despises me for being a construction worker, who talks to me as if I were his hired help, who says I'll never understand modern business, is about to discover that this old, uneducated man has more money than he'll earn in his lifetime. But first, I have to tell you how I got here, because this story of reckoning began long before that surgery. It all started the day I met Julian. Naomi was 25 and worked as a secretary at a major insurance firm downtown. One day, she came home, absolutely beaming. "Dad, I met someone special. His name is Julian, and he's an executive at the same company. He's smart, ambitious, and I think I'm in love." I was happy for my daughter. After all, I'd worked like a beast my whole life to give her a college education, so she wouldn't have to endure the hardships I did when I arrived from the small town without a dime in my pocket. The first time Julian came for dinner, he showed up in a suit that cost more than my paycheck for 2 months. He sat at my table, in the chair where I had sat thousands of times after 12-hour shifts on construction sites, and began talking about his projects, his goals, his dreams of grandeur. Naomi gazed at him, smitten, as if he were a fairy tale prince. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Holloway," he said with that salesman's smile that I disliked from the first second. "Naomi told me you work in construction. That must be very sacrificial work." Very sacrificial work. As if it were something to be ashamed of. As if buildings constructed themselves. "Yes," I replied. "It is sacrificial, but it's honest. It's the work that allowed me to pay for my daughter's schooling." "Oh, that's great, Mr. Holloway. It's admirable to see such dedicated parents. But let's hope Naomi can aspire to something better for her future. Something better." What was wrong with the job that had paid for her college degree? What was wrong with the trade that had put food on our table for 25 years? Naomi shot me a warning look, telling me not to cause a scene, not to ruin her chance with this office Prince Charming. During dinner, Julian wouldn't stop talking about his plans. "I'm working on a very important project, Mr. Holloway. We want to expand our insurance business across the entire region. In 5 years, I'll be regional manager, and in 10, I'll own my own firm." He spoke about money as if he were the only one who understood the subject, as if I were a simple laborer incapable of grasping the complexities of the corporate world. "And you, Mr. Holloway, do you have any plans for the future? Any investments? Any projects?" The way he asked made it clear he expected me to say no, to confirm that I was exactly the simple person he thought I was. I have my projects, I told him. They're not as sophisticated as yours, but they've worked out well for me so far. Julian smiled with that condescension that would later become so familiar. Of course, Mr. Holloway, everyone has their projects, according to their possibilities. The important thing is to be realistic about what one can achieve. Be realistic. As if my 30 years of life experience hadn't taught me anything about being realistic. As if I didn't know exactly what I could and could not accomplish. That night, after he left, Naomi scolded me. Dad, why were you so cold to Julian? He's a successful man. He has a future. Not like the boyfriends I had before. Not like the boyfriends she had before. That hurt. Naomi's previous boyfriends were hard-working, honest young men who treated her well, but they didn't have college degrees or office jobs. Boys, just like I had been at their age. Honey, I said, it's not that I'm cold. It's that the boy seems too arrogant. He acts like he's superior to us. Naomi sighed, as if she were talking to a stubborn child. Dad, Julian doesn't think he's superior. It's just that he comes from a different world. He has a different background. He's used to dealing with people on his level. People on his level. As if we were somehow on an inferior level. The months passed, and Julian became a fixture in our lives. He came for lunch every Sunday, always impeccably dressed, always with that smile that never quite reached his eyes. He brought flowers for Naomi and expensive wine for me, as if gifts could buy my approval. During those Sunday meals, I did the cooking because I enjoyed it. I'd learned after my wife died when Naomi was still a little girl. This is great cooking, Mr. Holloway, Julian would say, as he served himself a second helping. Though I have to admit I'm used to more elaborate meals. At the restaurants I frequent, the chefs prepare more sophisticated dishes. But this is perfectly fine for a home-cooked meal. For a home-cooked meal. As if my food was somehow inferior because I made it with my own hands instead of paying a chef. One afternoon, while I was fixing a leaky faucet in the bathroom, Julian walked in and just stood there, watching me work. Mr. Holloway, you never thought of hiring a plumber? I mean, so you don't have to get your hands dirty. I can fix this, I replied without looking up. I've been fixing things my whole life. Yes, but now that Naomi has a promising future, maybe it would be good for you to aspire to better things too. Aspire to better things. Aspire to not fix my own things. Aspire to pay others to do what I could do perfectly well. Better things like what? I asked him. Well, I don't know. Maybe you could invest in something. Start a small business. Although, of course, that requires capital. And I suppose, with a construction worker's salary, it can't be easy to save much. There it was again, subtly reminding me that he earned more money than me, that he had a bigger future than me. What Julian didn't know, what no one knew, was that I hadn't been spending my money on expensive clothes or sophisticated restaurants. Every dollar I earned, every extra dollar, I got working overtime. Every dollar I saved from household expenses. I had been investing, not in the stock market, not in complicated investment funds I didn't understand, but in something I did understand, real estate. You see, after 30 years of building houses and commercial properties, you learn to recognize which land will be worth more in the future. You learn to see which areas are going to be developed, which projects will change a property's value. While Julian was attending college, I was on the job sites, listening to the engineers talk about urban plans, new highway extensions, and rumors of private corporate parks moving in. My first big investment was when Naomi was just 10 years old. I was working on a large infrastructure project that was going to connect the city center to a rural area that was worth nothing at the time. For months, I listened to the engineers talk about future plans for that area, a new shopping mall, an office complex, even whispers of a new university campus. One Saturday morning, after cashing my paycheck, I took the bus out to that area. I walked through empty fields among cows and chicken coops, imagining what it would all become in 10 years. I found an old farmer who had 3 large plots of land and wanted to sell because he was moving out of state to live with his son. He asked for a sum that was a fortune to him, but for me, it represented exactly all my savings from 5 years of 12-hour workdays. That night, I couldn't sleep. It was a risky gamble. If I was wrong, I lost all the money I had worked for years to accumulate. But if I was right, Naomi would have a secure future. The following Monday, I took all my cash out of the bank and gave it to the old man. I became the owner of 3 plots of land in the middle of nowhere. For the next 2 years, every time I drove by, the area was the same: cows, chicken coops, and humble little homes. Naomi would ask me why we always went to look at those ugly fields on Sundays. I told her that one day she would understand. Julian, years later, would have told me I was crazy, that I had wasted my meager savings on an old, ignorant man's whim. But in year 3, construction on the highway extension began. The following year, the machines arrived for the shopping mall. By year 5, the university campus was inaugurated. By year 7, my 3 empty plots of land were in the heart of the city's most prosperous district. The money I had invested had multiplied by 20. With those profits, I bought 5 more parcels in another zone I knew was going to develop. This time, I didn't have to bet all my savings. I had insider knowledge because I was building the foundation of what would become the new public hospital. Land around a hospital always appreciates. Pharmacies, private clinics, labs, and restaurants for visiting families all follow. That's how I built my real estate portfolio, investment by investment, opportunity by opportunity. I didn't need finance books or financial advisors. I got my education on the job sites, listening to conversations, watching how the city grew, and understanding where urban development was moving. 15 years ago, I bought my first large tract. It was a parcel on the edge of the suburbs, cheap because it was far from everything. But I had seen the blueprints for a new parkway that was going to cut right through the area. 5 years later, when that parkway was completed, the land was worth 10 times what I had paid for it. I sold it and bought 2 bigger parcels in another developing area. That's how I put together a small real estate empire that no one knew about. My daughter believed I lived paycheck to paycheck on my construction salary. Julian saw me as a simple laborer with no financial education. The neighbors thought I was just a retired worker living on my pension. No one knew that my bank account held millions of dollars, that I owned properties in 3 different cities, and that I had invested better than many college-educated executives. Why did I keep the secret for so long? Maybe because I wanted to protect Naomi from fortune hunters. Maybe because I wanted them to love me for who I was, not what I had. Maybe because I grew up poor and knew money can change people in unexpected ways. Or maybe, simply, because I enjoyed the irony of being underestimated by people who thought they were better than me. Naomi and Julian's relationship got serious fast. Within 8 months, they were talking about marriage. Naomi was happier than I'd ever seen her, and I tried to be happy for her, even though every conversation with her fiancé confirmed he was exactly the kind of man I feared: ambitious, calculating, and deeply dismissive of anyone he considered inferior. One day, Naomi asked for a serious talk. "Dad, Julian asked me to marry him." I said yes, but I want to talk to you first. I want you to know he's the man of my life, and I hope you can accept him as part of the family. Of course I accept him, honey. If you're happy, I'm happy. Though I have to confess that sometimes I feel like he sees us as being from a lower social class. Naomi sighed. Dad, Julian isn't like that. It's just that he comes from a well-off family. His father is a doctor. His mother is a university professor. He's used to a certain lifestyle, but that doesn't mean he looks down on us. We're just different. Different. That word again, used as an elegant way of saying inferior. The wedding took place 8 months later. It was a small but elegant ceremony, paid for mostly by Julian's parents. I contributed what I could without revealing my true financial resources. Naomi looked beautiful, radiant, and completely in love. During the reception, Julian gave a speech thanking both families. But when he spoke about me, he said, "I especially want to thank Mr. Holloway, who, despite his economic limitations, did everything possible to give Naomi a good education." Despite his economic limitations. He said it in front of all the guests, as if it were a compliment, as if he were highlighting my superhuman effort to overcome my poverty. But I knew he was marking territory, establishing who was the successful one in the relationship and who was the poor father-in-law who had done what he could with the few resources he had. After the wedding, things got worse. Julian had gotten the promotion he was aiming for and was now earning very well. They moved into a bigger apartment. Naomi quit her job because he insisted she dedicate herself to the home. Visits to my small condo became increasingly sporadic. What hurt the most wasn't the frequency of the visits, but the quality. When Naomi came alone, we were just as we'd always been, father and daughter, who told each other everything, who shared their worries and joys. But when she came with Julian, it was as if she were wearing a mask. She became more formal, more distant, as if she had to prove she had evolved, that she was no longer the construction worker's daughter, but the executive's wife. I remember one particular evening, about 6 months after the wedding, when they came to visit. Naomi had brought a store-bought cake from a fancy bakery, not like the ones I taught her to make when she was little. During tea, Julian wouldn't stop talking about his work achievements, the important meetings he attended, the multi-million-dollar projects he managed. "Mr. Holloway, I was just telling Naomi that this month I closed an insurance sale for $200,000. It's the biggest contract I've ever handled. The commission will allow me to trade in my car for a newer model." Naomi looked at him with admiration, as if he'd done something extraordinary. I had built commercial buildings worth 50 times that amount, but of course, that wasn't a topic of conversation in their new social circle. I also started noticing subtle changes in Naomi's vocabulary. Words she'd never used before appeared in our conversations. She talked about networking, professional objectives, and lifestyle. One day, she told me she was considering taking English classes because, in Julian's environment, it was important to be fluent in the language. Julian's environment, as if it were a world she was lucky to access. But what truly struck me was a conversation we had one Sunday while I was grilling steaks, as I had done every Sunday since she was small. Naomi was telling me about a company dinner they had attended. "Dad, we met some really interesting people. There were doctors, lawyers, entrepreneurs. Julian fit in perfectly. Everyone treated him like an equal." "And how did you feel?" I asked her as I flipped the meat. "Well, a little intimidated at first. Those people are so cultured. They've traveled a lot. They talk about topics I don't know much about. But Julian helped me. He introduced me as his wife. He included me in the conversations." "Honey, you have your own culture, your own intelligence. You don't need anyone to introduce you. You can introduce yourself." Naomi was quiet for a few minutes. Then she said something that broke my heart. "Dad, you don't understand what that world is like. It's not like here in the old neighborhood where everyone knows each other and treats each other the same. There are codes, ways of speaking, of dressing, of behaving. If I show up saying I'm the daughter of Marcus, the construction worker, they're going to look at me funny." "Are you ashamed to be my daughter?" I asked her directly. "No, Dad, never. I'm proud of everything you did for me. But I also understand that I have to adapt to my new reality." Julian is right when he says, I have to think about the future, about the kind of life we want to build together. That phrase resonated with me for weeks. The kind of life we want to build together. A life where apparently there was no room for the construction worker father, for simple Sunday gatherings, for the modesty of our traditions. A life where you had to be ashamed of your origins in order to belong to your destiny. When they did visit, it was usually because they needed something. "Dad, could you watch the condo while we're on vacation?" "Dad, could you fix this sticking door?" "Dad, do you have any cash put away? We want to buy a new car, and we need help with the down payment." It was always something practical, something that justified the visit without having to admit they came to see me because they loved me. Julian had developed the habit of giving me unsolicited advice about my life. "Mr. Holloway, you're at the age where you should consider selling this condo and moving somewhere smaller. Maintenance costs must be high, and with your pension, it must be hard to make ends meet. You could look for something more modest, more in line with your possibilities." Or, "Mr. Holloway, I see you walk everywhere. Haven't you thought about buying a used car? Something simple, nothing ostentatious, but something to make your life easier. I know a dealer who has cheap cars, the kind that are within everyone's budget. The kind that are within everyone's budget. As if my budget were automatically limited because I worked with my hands." The last straw came last year. Naomi and Julian had been saving to buy a house, their first home. They had found one they loved in an upscale, middle-class neighborhood, but they needed a considerable down payment. One evening, they both came to visit. And by the way they looked at each other, I knew they had come with a mission. "Dad," Naomi began, "we want to ask you a huge favor. We found our dream house, but we need help with the down payment. We know you don't have much money saved, but we thought maybe you could get a loan, or sell something, or, I don't know, find a way to help us." Julian leaned forward with that smile I knew so well. "Mr. Holloway, we know it's a lot to ask, but this is a unique opportunity. The house is in an excellent area. It will appreciate greatly over time. If you help us with $50,000, we'll pay you back in 2 years with interest. It's an investment for the whole family. $50,000. A sum that was insignificant to me, but that for them represented an enormous sacrifice on my part." The way they framed it made it clear they expected me to go into debt, to sell the few things I had, to sacrifice one more time for my daughter's happiness. That's a lot of money, I told them. I'll have to see what I can do. Julian leaned in closer. Mr. Holloway, I understand that $50,000 is a fortune to you, but think of it this way. This investment will secure Naomi's future. You'll have a house of your own. You'll be able to start a family without worrying about rent. And when we're established, we'll be able to take better care of you in your old age. Take care of me in my old age. As if I were a decrepit old man who would need their charity, instead of a man who had worked his whole life to secure his own future. I'll think about it, I told them. Give me a few days to see what I can manage. They left that night, convinced that I would move heaven and earth to get that $50,000, probably calculating how long it would take me to scrape together that amount, what sacrifices I would have to make, what things I would have to sell. What they didn't know was that I had 50 times that amount in my bank accounts. For one full week, I pretended to be worried about the money. I called Naomi several times to ask for details about the house, the deadlines, and whether it was truly urgent. Julian called me twice to gently pressure me, reminding me what a great opportunity it was, and how properties in that area were going to appreciate. Finally, I told them I had managed to get the money. I had sold some old tools. I had taken out a bank loan using my condo as collateral. I had pooled all my savings from years of work. The lie suited them so well that they didn't ask questions. Naomi hugged me, crying, thanking me for the sacrifice. Julian patted my shoulder and told me I was a great father-in-law, that he knew he could count on me. I gave them the $50,000 and watched them sign the papers for their dream house. A beautiful house in an excellent neighborhood, with a yard and a 2-car garage. A house that cost exactly the same amount that I held in just one of my investment accounts. While they celebrated their achievement, I smiled, thinking of the irony of the situation. The following months were revealing. Now that they had their own house, the visits became even more scarce. When they came, Julian used the time to tell me about his remodeling plans, the new furniture they were buying, and how the property's value had increased since they bought it. He also used the time to give me more advice about my life. Mr. Holloway, now that we're established, you should think about selling this condo. With the money you get, plus what we pay you back from the loan, you could buy something smaller but more modern, something in a senior living community where you don't have to worry about maintenance or complicated things. Or, Mr. Holloway, Naomi and I are thinking of having children soon. When that happens, it's going to be harder for us to visit you regularly. Maybe it would be good for you to find a hobby, some activity for older people. There are community centers that organize things for retirees. You could make friends your own age, people who understand your situation. As if my situation was being a lonely, poor old man who needed charity and activities to keep him entertained. As if I didn't have a life of my own interests, a reality he didn't know and didn't bother to learn about. The decisive moment came 6 months ago during a dinner at their new house. It was my 65th birthday, and Naomi had insisted on celebrating it at their home. She prepared a delicious dinner, bought a cake, and greeted me with hugs and smiles. For a moment, I thought maybe I had misjudged Julian, that maybe he genuinely cared about me. During dinner, the conversation turned to my plans for the future. Naomi asked if I had thought about retiring permanently, if I had any plans for the next few years. Julian joined the conversation with apparent enthusiasm. Mr. Holloway, at your age, you should be enjoying life, not worrying about work. Have you thought about traveling? About taking a vacation? Of course, with a retiree's budget, you have to be modest, but you can always find something accessible. I replied that I didn't have specific plans, that I was taking it day by day. Julian insisted. Look, Mr. Holloway, Naomi and I have been talking, and we believe you could benefit from having more structure in your life. There are some very nice senior living residences where they have scheduled activities. People your age, constant medical attention. Senior living residences, I asked. Do you mean a nursing home? No, Mr. Holloway, not a nursing home. Modern residences, like clubs for older people. Places where you can live independently, but with the security of having help if you need it. And the best part is, they're not that expensive. With the sale of your condo and your pension, you could probably afford a very decent one. There was the full proposal that I sell my condo, move into a luxury assisted living facility, and use all my money to pay for care I didn't need. Meanwhile, they would have the peace of mind of having solved the problem of the aging father-in-law without having to personally care for him. Naomi joined the proposal. Dad, it's not a bad idea. You could meet new people, have activities to do, and we would be more relaxed knowing you're well cared for. Besides, with the children we want to have, it's going to be harder to visit you regularly. Harder to visit you regularly. As if the sporadic visits they made now were going to decrease even further. As if I were a bothersome formality they wanted to resolve in the most convenient way for themselves. That night, as I drove back to my condo, I made a decision. If they wanted to treat me like a poor, useless old man, if they wanted to get rid of me by sending me to assisted living, if they thought they could manipulate me into selling everything I owned, then it was time for them to meet the real Marcus Holloway. I arrived home and opened the safe I keep hidden behind a painting in my bedroom. I pulled out all the documents I had been saving for years. Property deeds, bank statements, investment contracts. I laid them on the table and looked at them for hours, calculating exactly how much everything I had accumulated was worth. The figure was impressive. I had properties valued at $8 million, investments totaling another $3 million, and $2 million in cash. In total, $13 million. A fortune I had built brick by brick, investment by investment, while my son-in-law condescendingly explained to me how business worked. But the real revelation came 3 days later when I went for my routine medical checkup. The doctor asked me to undergo additional tests because he had found something irregular on my electrocardiogram. A week later, he called me into his office to give me the results. Mr. Holloway, I have to be honest with you. You have severe arterial blockage that requires immediate surgery. It's a delicate operation, especially at your age. The chances of success are 50%. If you don't have the surgery, you have 6 months to live at most. If you have the surgery and everything goes well, you can live many more years, 50% chance. A coin toss, deciding between life and death. That night, sitting in my condo, surrounded by the documents of my secret fortune, I had a revelation that changed everything. If I died in the operation, all that money would go to Naomi and Julian. My daughter would legally inherit it, and her husband would become the rich man he always wanted to be, using the money of the father-in-law he had despised for years. The irony was perfect and terrible at the same time. The man who saw me as an obstacle, who wanted to send me to a nursing home, who talked to me as if I were a financial idiot, was going to become a millionaire through my death. He would buy luxury cars, bigger houses. He would travel the world, all with the money of the ignorant construction worker he had underestimated. I couldn't let that happen. Not after years of subtle humiliations, of condescension disguised as kindness, of being treated like a poor relative who had to be tolerated out of obligation. Julian had chosen his attitude toward me, and now I was going to choose the consequences of that attitude. The next day, I started executing the most satisfying plan of my life. First, I called my attorney, David Mitchell, a serious man who had handled several real estate deals for me. David, I need to make some important changes to my will, and I need to handle some urgent transactions. I have surgery scheduled, and I want to put everything in order. I explained the whole situation. My son-in-law's attitude, his desire for me to sell everything and move to assisted living, his complete ignorance of my true financial situation. The attorney listened to me with a growing smile. Mr. Holloway, I understand perfectly what you want to do, and let me tell you, I think it's completely justified. That night, before going to sleep, I thought about all the times Julian had made me feel small, insignificant, a hindrance to his grand plans. I recalled every condescending piece of advice, every fake smile, every comment about my economic limitations. I also thought about Naomi, how she had changed since marrying him, how she had begun to see me through her husband's eyes. Do you see the irony of the situation? The man who despised me for not having a college education was about to discover that my practical knowledge had made me richer than all his academic theories. The executive who explained how modern business worked was about to learn that the oldest business in the world, buying low and selling high, was still the most effective. During the 2 weeks it took to prepare my plan, I had time to reflect on many things. I wondered if I wasn't being too cruel, if there wasn't another way to resolve the situation. But every time I doubted, I remembered a specific humiliation, like the time Julian told his friends in front of me that his father-in-law was a manual laborer without a formal education, or when he suggested to Naomi that she shouldn't invite me to his company's holiday dinner because I wouldn't know how to behave in that environment. The plan was simple but devastating. First, I was going to change my will completely. Instead of leaving everything to Naomi, I was going to create a trust for my future grandchildren, if I ever had them, who could only access the inheritance when they turned 25. For Naomi, I would leave just enough to live modestly, and for Julian, absolutely nothing. Second, and most importantly, I was going to sell all my properties immediately and buy their house. Yes, exactly that dream house for which they had asked me for a $50,000 loan. The house Julian believed was his great achievement, his symbol of success, his proof that he had surpassed the poor father-in-law. But there was a third part of the plan that I didn't tell my attorney, a more personal part. I wanted the moment of revelation to be perfect. I wanted to be present when Julian discovered the truth. I wanted to see his face of disbelief, of absolute shock, of total humiliation. I wanted him to experience even a small part of what he had made me feel for 4 years. The most delicious irony of it all was that Julian had been giving me financial advice based on the assumption that I was poor and ignorant. If he had been humble enough to ask me about my life, instead of assuming he knew it, maybe we would have had a different relationship. If he had shown even a little respect for my experience and my intelligence, maybe we would have found common ground. But he had chosen to see me as an obstacle to his ambitions, as an uncomfortable reminder of his wife's humble origins. He had decided it was his duty to educate me, civilize me, and finally dispose of me in the way most convenient for him. Now, He was going to discover the consequences of underestimating the wrong person. Attorney Mitchell found out that the original owners of the house were willing to sell it for a considerable sum, much more than Naomi and Julian had paid for it. Apparently, they had urgent debts and needed immediate liquidity. Perfect for my plans. The transaction took 2 weeks. I sold 6 of my properties at excellent prices, liquidated most of my investments, and gathered the necessary cash to buy the house. The attorney handled all the legal procedures, ensuring that everything was completely legal and that Naomi and Julian would have no way to contest anything. Meanwhile, I kept acting like the usual poor father-in-law. I went to visit them once during those 2 weeks, and Julian took the opportunity to keep pressuring me about the assisted living topic. Mr. Holloway, I've been researching some senior residences. I found one that's very nice. It's not expensive and has great references. Would you like us to go visit it? He also told me about his remodeling plans for the house. We're thinking of enlarging the kitchen, changing the living room floors, maybe adding another bedroom for when we have children. This house is going to appreciate so much with the improvements we're going to make. How ironic. He was planning to remodel a house that was no longer his, using money he didn't have to increase the value of a property that now belonged to me. Every word he said made my revenge sweeter. The week before the surgery, Attorney Mitchell called me to confirm that everything was ready. Mr. Holloway, the transaction is complete. You are officially the new owner of your son-in-law's house. The documents will be delivered tomorrow morning. I also have all the papers for the new will and the instructions for the trust ready. Perfect, I said. Now all that's left is for me to survive the operation so I can enjoy the show. That night, I called Naomi to tell her the surgery was scheduled for the following Friday. I wanted her to be present, not because I needed her emotional support, but because I wanted her to witness what was about to happen afterward. Dad, Naomi said, her voice cracking, everything is going to be fine. You're strong. You've worked your whole life. Your heart will withstand the operation. And when you get out, we'll talk about the assisted living. I think Julian is right. It would be good for you to have more care. Friday finally arrived. Naomi and Julian accompanied me to the hospital. And during the drive, Julian took the opportunity to give me more advice about my post-operative future. Mr. Holloway, after the surgery, you'll need rest, special care. A senior living residence would be ideal for your recovery. They have nurses 24 hours a day, balanced meals, physical therapy activities. In the waiting room, while they prepped me for the operation, I saw Naomi crying silently. Julian consoled her, telling her everything would be fine, that I was strong, and that in a few hours we would be celebrating the success of the operation. But I knew he was mentally calculating what would happen if I didn't survive, how much money they would inherit, and how it would change their financial lives. Before entering the operating room, I told Attorney Mitchell, who had come as a legal witness, David, if anything happens to me during the operation, make sure the documents are delivered exactly as we agreed, and if I survive, deliver them just the same. It's time for my family to know some truths that have been waiting too long. The operation lasted 4 hours. 4 hours during which Naomi and Julian waited in the hallway, probably alternating between genuine worry and financial calculations. When I woke up in the recovery room, the first thing I thought about wasn't my health, but what was about to happen. The doctor informed me that the operation had been a complete success. The arterial blockage had been removed. My heart was working perfectly, and my prognosis was excellent. I would live many more years to enjoy my revenge, and to see the fears of Naomi and Julian when they discovered who their poor father-in-law really was. 2 days later, when I was stable and could receive visitors, Naomi and Julian came to see me. They brought flowers, chocolates, and that relieved smile of someone who knows the elderly relative has survived the crisis. And now it's time to proceed with the original plans. Dad, you scared us, Naomi said as she hugged me. But it's all over now. You're well. Now we can think about the future. Julian nodded enthusiastically. Mr. Holloway, now that we know you'll be healthy, we can move forward with the residence issue. In fact, I took advantage of these past few days to make some inquiries. There's one with a waiting list, but if we hurry, we can secure a spot. That was the perfect moment. I pulled out my phone and called Attorney Mitchell. David, I'm ready. You can proceed with the delivery of the documents. Naomi and Julian looked at me, confused. What documents, Dad? Who are you talking to? Just then, Julian's phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize, but he answered anyway. Julian Hayes speaking? Yes, this is the closing agent, Ms. Chen. I need to deliver some urgent documents related to your property in Parkside Estates. Are you at your home? We can stop by in 1 hour. Julian paled. My property? What documents? What are you talking about? On the other end of the line, the closing agent confirmed the address and informed him that she had very important documents he needed to review immediately. Julian hung up and looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. Mr. Holloway, do you know anything about this? I don't understand what could be so urgent with our house. I smiled, with the first genuine smile I had given him in 4 years. Julian, I think it's time for you to go home. There are some surprises waiting for you there. Naomi was increasingly confused. Dad, what is happening? Why are you talking about surprises? Why is that attorney calling Julian about our house? Honey, I said, taking her hand, there are a lot of things you don't know about your old man. Things I've been keeping for a long time, waiting for the right moment to reveal them. Julian excused himself quickly. Mr. Holloway, Naomi, I have to go home and see what this is about. It must be some mistake, some problem with the paperwork. I'll see you both tomorrow morning. He practically ran out with that worried look. I knew well, because I had seen it every time. Something threatened his perfect plans. Naomi stayed with me, asking questions I didn't answer. Dad, you're scaring me. What's going on with the house? Why are you talking about secrets? What things don't I know about you? Just wait, honey, I told her. Tomorrow you'll understand everything. And I promise you'll be very surprised. That night, I slept better than I had in months, not only because the operation had been successful and my heart was working perfectly, but because I knew that the next day, my son-in-law was going to have the biggest surprise of his life, and I was going to be there to see it. The next morning, Naomi arrived early at the hospital. She was alone and had a strange expression on her face. Dad, I need you to explain what happened yesterday. Julian got home and met 2 closing agents who gave him some documents. When he read them, he passed out. He literally fainted in our living room. And what did the documents say? I asked, feigning innocence. Naomi pulled some papers from her purse. They said the house is no longer ours, that someone bought it, that we have 30 days to vacate. But that's impossible, Dad. We bought that house 1 year ago. It's in our name. We paid the down payment with the money you lent us. Yes, the $50,000 that was so hard for me to scrape together. And who appears as the new owner on those documents? Naomi scanned the papers with trembling hands. Marcus Holloway. The new owner is named Marcus Holloway. Dad, that's your name? It must be a coincidence, right? It must be another person with the same name as you. No, honey, it's not a coincidence. It's me. I bought your house. Naomi looked at me as if I had lost my mind. You bought our house? Dad, that's impossible. That house cost $1.5 million. You don't have that kind of money. You live on your pension. You worked your whole life in construction. You don't have significant savings. There was that automatic assumption again, that I was poor, that I couldn't have significant resources because I had worked with my hands. Honey, I said, there are a lot of things you don't know about me. Many things I've been keeping for years, waiting for the right moment to reveal them. I pulled a folder from my nightstand that I had prepared especially for this moment. It contained copies of all my bank statements, property deeds, investment contracts, and the purchase document for their house. Naomi looked through everything with increasingly wide, disbelieving eyes. Dad, this says you have millions of dollars, that you have properties, investments, bank accounts. How is this possible? Why did you never tell us anything? Why did you live as if you were poor? Because I wanted you to love me for who I am, not what I have, because I wanted to protect you from fortune hunters, and because I wanted to see how you all treated me when you believed I had nothing to offer. Naomi was silent for several minutes, processing all the information. Finally, she asked, "And why did you buy our house? Why are you kicking us out? What did we do wrong?" "I'm not kicking you out, honey. I'm kicking him out. Your husband, who for 4 years has treated me like a useless old man, who wanted to send me to a nursing home, who talked to me as if I were an ignorant fool who didn't understand anything about money." Naomi started crying. "Dad, Julian isn't mean. It's just that he comes from a different social class. He's not used to people like us. He doesn't know how to treat you. People like us, Naomi. Do you hear yourself when you talk? Your husband has brainwashed you into believing that we are inferior to him, that I am inferior to him. But Dad, what's going to happen to us now? Where are we going to live? Naomi, you are my daughter, and you will always be my daughter. For you, I have a beautiful condo that I bought 2 years ago in a very good neighborhood. You can live there for as long as you want, without paying rent, without worrying about anything, but on one condition. What condition? That you divorce Julian. That you free yourself from that man who doesn't value you, who doesn't respect me, who only sees our family as an opportunity to feel superior." At that moment, Julian entered the room. He looked disheveled, with deep dark circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept all night. Without greeting anyone, he walked straight up to me. "Mr. Holloway, I need you to explain what's going on. The documents say you bought our house, but that's impossible. You don't have that kind of money. It must be a mistake, a legal confusion, some problem with the names." "It's no mistake, Julian. I bought the house where you live. The house you thought was your great achievement, your symbol of success." Julian looked at me as if he were seeing a ghost. But how? Where did you get so much money? How could you afford a house that costs over $1 million? I showed him the same folder I had shown Naomi. Julian reviewed the documents with trembling hands, growing paler and more disbelieving with each page. "This can't be real," he murmured. "You're a contractor. You live on your pension. You don't have financial education. You can't have more money than me." It was exactly the reaction I had expected. The absolute disbelief that the poor father-in-law could have more resources than him, the successful executive. "Julian, for 4 years, you have treated me like an idiot. You have talked down to me. You have given me advice about money as if you were my superior. You wanted to send me to a nursing home to get rid of me. All that time, I had more money in a single bank account than you will earn in your lifetime. But then why did you never tell us anything? Why did you live as if you were poor. Why did you loan us money to help with the house? Because I wanted to see how far your contempt would go. I wanted to see if you truly saw me as a nuisance, as a useless old man you needed to get rid of. And you exceeded all my expectations. Naomi continued to cry. Dad, can we fix this? Julian can change. He can treat you better. We can be a united family. No, Naomi. 4 years of humiliation cannot be fixed with promises of change. The fact that your husband wanted to send me to an assisted living facility using my own money cannot be fixed. Julian stood up abruptly. This is crazy. You're insane. If you think we're going to accept this, we'll fight this legally. We'll prove this purchase is illegal, that it was done to prejudice us. You can try, Julian. My attorneys are waiting for any legal action you wish to pursue. Everything I did is completely legal. I bought a house that was for sale, paid the price the original owners asked, and now I am the legitimate owner. And what do you want from us? What do you intend to achieve with this? I want you out of my house in 30 days, as the legal document states. I want you to find another place to live, to pay your own rent, to manage without the help of the poor father-in-law you despised so much. And Naomi can stay if she wants. For her, I have a beautiful place, a comfortable life, all the support she needs, but not with you. Julian turned to Naomi in desperation. Naomi, your dad has gone crazy. We can't separate over this. I'm your family. You have to be on my side. Naomi looked at me for a long time, her eyes full of tears. Finally, she spoke. Julian, over these years, my dad never asked me for anything. He worked his whole life to pay for my education. He supported me in everything I wanted to do. And when we asked him for help with the house, he sacrificed himself to give it to us. And you always treated him as if he were less than us. But Naomi, I respect him. I always treated him well. I just wanted what was best for him to have adequate care in his old age. You wanted to send him to a nursing home, Julian. You wanted him to sell everything he owned, to pay for a residence he didn't need, just so you wouldn't have to deal with him. The argument continued for another hour, but I knew I had already won. Naomi's eyes had been opened. She had seen her husband for who he really was. Julian had shown his true colors, his desperation when his plans collapsed, his inability to accept that he had underestimated the poor father-in-law. In the end, Naomi made the decision I had hoped for. Julian, I think we need some time apart. I'm going to live in the condo my dad offered me, and you find another place. When all this settles down, we'll see what happens to our marriage. Julian stormed out of the hospital, yelling that this wouldn't be the end of it, that he would fight legally, that no one was going to humiliate him like this. But I knew he had nothing he could do. Everything I had done was completely legal. And besides, he now had no money to pay for expensive attorneys. The $50,000 he had spent on the house's down payment had been his only significant savings. Naomi stayed with me until I was discharged from the hospital. During those days, we talked a lot about everything that had happened, the mistakes we had made, and the future she had ahead of her. I explained in detail how I had built my fortune, the investments I had made, and the opportunities I had seen and seized. I also explained why I had kept the secret for so long. It wasn't just to protect her from fortune hunters, but because I had learned that money changes people in unpredictable ways. I wanted her to love me for who I was, not what I could give her. The condo I offered Naomi was truly beautiful. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a spectacular view of the city, in a safe and quiet neighborhood. I had bought it thinking of her from the very beginning, as an investment for her future. When she saw the place, she burst into tears again. "Dad, this condo is incredible. It must have cost a fortune. Why did you do so much for me without telling me anything?" "Because you are the most important thing in my life, Naomi. Everything I did thinking about your future. But I also wanted you to learn to value people for who they are, not for what they have." Julian tried several times to reconcile with Naomi over the following weeks. He called her, sent her flowers, and promised her that he had understood his mistakes and would change, but the damage was done. Naomi had seen his true personality when things got complicated. She had seen how he reacted when his plans didn't work out. 6 months later, Naomi finally divorced Julian. It was a difficult but necessary decision. She had realized that she had been living trying to impress a man who didn't truly value her, who only saw her as part of his image of success. And what happened to the house? I sold it 3 months after kicking them out for double what I had paid for it. The real estate market in that area had exploded, exactly as I had predicted. With those profits, I bought 2 more condos to rent out, securing a constant income stream for my old age. Julian had to move into a small apartment in a much less prestigious neighborhood. Without the savings he had spent on the house's down payment, without Naomi's financial support, and without the social connections that came from being married to my daughter, his career began to decline. The last I heard, he had lost his job and was looking for work at much smaller companies. Naomi, on the other hand, flourished after the divorce. Without the pressure of having to maintain a lifestyle she couldn't afford, without constantly having to impress a husband who was never satisfied, she found a job at a company where they valued her real skills. She also met a man who treats her as she deserves, who respects her, and who treats me with the dignity I never received from Julian. And me, Marcus Holloway, at 66 years old and after successful heart surgery, I'm living better than ever. I have a beautiful relationship with my daughter, a fortune that allows me to live comfortably, and the satisfaction of having put a man in his place who despised me without knowing who I really was. You might ask if I regret what I did. The answer is no. Julian chose to treat me like a poor, ignorant old man for 4 years. He chose to subtly humiliate me, to belittle my intelligence, to want to get rid of me by sending me to assisted living. I simply showed him the consequences of his decisions. Life has taught me that there are 2 types of people in the world: those who respect you no matter how much money you have, and those who only respect you when they discover you have more than they thought. Julian was clearly the second type, and that's why he deserved exactly what he got. Now, when I drive through the neighborhood where that house was, I smile, remembering Julian's face when he found out who the new owner really was. The look of disbelief, of absolute shock, of a man who discovered he had completely underestimated the wrong person. You know what's the most ironic thing about this whole story? Julian was right about one thing. I effectively did not have a formal financial education. I never studied economics. I never took investment courses. I never read complicated books about the stock market. But I had something that he, with all his college education, never possessed: the practical intelligence of someone who had worked his whole life and learned to recognize opportunities when he saw them. While he was studying theories in college, I was on the job sites, watching how the city developed, listening to engineers talk about future projects, seeing which areas were going to grow. While he was learning about finance in books, I was learning about real life in real life. And that difference, in the end, was what determined who truly ended up being successful and who ended up being merely a man with a college degree but without the wisdom to recognize the value in people he considered inferior. If you are listening to this story and you have someone in your life who treats you with contempt, who underestimates you, who believes they are superior to you, without truly knowing who you are, let me give you some advice. Don't seek revenge for revenge's sake, but don't allow them to disrespect you either. Sometimes the best response to arrogance is simply to show what you're really made of. And then always remember that money can buy many things, but it cannot buy genuine respect, true love, or the satisfaction of knowing you have lived your life with dignity. Those things are earned in another way, with actions, with character, with the way you treat people, regardless of how much money you think they have. This is my story, the story of Marcus Holloway, the blue-collar worker who turned out to be a millionaire, the poor father-in-law who bought his son-in-law's house, the old man who taught a lesson in humility to the one who thought he could humiliate him. And if you ever find yourself in a similar situation, I hope you have the courage to defend yourself, the intelligence to plan your response, and the patience to wait for the perfect moment to show what you are truly made of. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how many degrees you have, how much money you earn, or what neighborhood you live in. What matters is how you treat people, especially those you think have less power than you. And if you make a mistake in that evaluation, as my ex-son-in-law did, the consequences can be bigger than you ever imagined. Did you like my story? If you listened till the end, drop a number 1 in the comments. If you enjoyed it, you can support me by liking the video and sending a small tip. I've got lots of other life stories like this on my channel, so make sure to subscribe and check them out. I've added 2 new stories on screen that everyone loves. Thanks for being here. See you in the next one with love.